All right, it's a Security Weekly News, episode 203. I'm Doug White, and welcome to the week of 10 April 2022. I got a great show for you today. Sandworm, Protestware, FancyBear, Eyeball, McSqueezy, Quantum, Spring4Shell, PacketStreamer, bad tax software, and autonomous criminals. All this in the return of Russ on this edition of Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. FIREMON helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. FIREMON has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With FIREMON, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with FIREMON. Visit securityweekly.com/FIREMON to learn more. Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
All right, first up, CISA. That's a Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency of the United States, so that we don't get all nationalistic, issued an order to federal civilian agencies and pretty much everybody else. They can't order you around, but they order around federal agencies. They said to patch this bug in WatchGuard Firebox and XTM firewall appliances. The warning was in response to new evidence that Sandworm, which is an APT, which believed to be part of the Russian Military Intelligence Agency, GRU, was actively exploiting CVE 2022-23176. And they were building a new botnet, which is called, it's a cool name, Cyclops Blink. Like one of my favorite cool names now for a while. Cyclops Blink is really, really cool. Like, if I was going to be like a porn star or something, that would be my name, Cyclops Blink. But anyway, they're using WatchGuard small office and home office devices, SOHO devices, and basically the bug that is in those devices allows remote attackers with unprivileged credentials to access the privilege management session. So this is something we've seen over and over and over again with various infrastructure equipment. Now, here's the thing, though. The device actually has to be configured to allow unrestricted management access from the internet, which should not be the setting and is not the default setting on the modern devices. But guess what? What happened when the pandemic started? A lot of people turned off this kind of security because people were working from home. They couldn't come in the building. And so they turned off their security and they set this so they could access the web interfaces from outside. Wah, wah, wah. Anyway, CISA ordered patches to be put in place by the 2nd of May for federal agencies. Cyclops Blink, the malware that they're using to build this botnet, is being used against WatchGuard Firebox and other ASUS routers since at least June of 2019. It's a modular malware, and so that means that it may do anything somebody wants it to. It may be being used for other tasks, but they're heavily targeting. The U.S. government announced that they had disrupted the Cyclops Blink botnet on Wednesday by removing Cyclops Blink from devices that were acting as command and control servers, which effectively shut it down at least temporarily. But the FBI warned that despite the removal of malware, until the owners of these vulnerable boxes make fixes, well, guess what? They're just going to come back and take over the box again and put the malware right back on there. So, patch up or disable this feature, please. Probably you should do both because, yeah. For the third time in 2022, an open source project has been used to protest the actions of Russia in the Ukraine. This latest one, and apparently this was done on the 17th of March, was in an API called Event Source Polyfill. And this is a JavaScript package that is in around 135,000 GitHub repositories and downloaded over 600,000 times a week on NPM. So it's a heavily used component. Basically what it is, polyfill is used to expand the event source API that was put in Mozilla. So Mozilla had that event source API in there, and of course, obviously, if you have a website, you want other browsers to be able to hit this same kind of stuff. So that's what this polyfill thing does, so that your stuff can be used on multiple platforms. In version 1.0.26, anti-war messages are now displayed on the screen to Russia-based users after 15 seconds, and they started calling it Protestware. So now I guess we have another thing to worry about. Several other popular packages, though, have also joined into the fray with this, with similar messaging. ES5-EXT and styled components are other NPM packages that have large numbers of downloads, like millions, and are now also found to be Protestware. I want the Russians out of the Ukraine just as bad as the rest of you do, and I would really like to end wars, not just that war, but like all wars and all that kind of stuff. But it still worries me a little bit, because as our code gets more dependent on APIs that have APIs in them with other APIs supporting them, well, you know where it's going. I mean, it seems like a pretty short leap to apps being held hostage by, and I just wrote insert name of some popular cause here, because all the causes I put down, I was like, this is going to make somebody really mad. And then I took the other one to my wife and said, what do you think about this one? And she was like, don't say that out loud. No, you shouldn't say that. So I just put insert name of some popular cause here. I mean, when it's against something that I'm against, of course I'm all for it. But, well, where does it stop? And when are your apps being held hostage for causes you don't necessarily support? Very scary stuff, in my humble opinion. Microsoft seized 7 domains that they claim were part of ongoing cyber attacks against the Ukraine and were being used by Russian APT-28 that is also an alleged state-sponsored attacker named FancyBear. And Microsoft said that FancyBear was using the domains to target Ukrainian media organizations, government institutions, and foreign policy think tanks in the U.S. and Europe, as well as the Ukraine. Now, they did do this with a court order, which was obtained to authorize Microsoft, who I never get to make these nicknames up, and other people get to make up cool nicknames like FancyBear. So I'm going to nickname Microsoft Eyeball McSqueezy, and so from now on, that's just that's going to be their nickname, because they're always nicknaming stuff and calling it Solitoid or whatever. I'm going to call them Eyeball McSqueezy, because they always get to make up the names for things, and I never get asked. So there. I do like Iron Twilight, though. That's another name for APT-28. I mean, it sounds like a John Varley novel, or maybe like a Marvel character, like Iron Twilight is coming, kind of thing. I was kind of on that. Anywho, apparently they sinkhole the domains, which limits FancyBear's ability to use them in the future, because all the data goes into a black hole. The campaign was an attempt to establish long-term access to targets, which would make them usable in future attacks, as well as extracting credentials for, probably credential stuffing attacks on other things. Because, I mean, if old Bob at tritiumsupply.com uses the password Lucky Dragon, well, old Bob probably used that same password on his account down at NORAD, the place where the end of the world starts. Yeah, that place. So Microsoft has definitely done this before. It's a historical precedent, and they have, anytime they saw domains being abused, and in particular, they've seized 91 domains with 15 separate quarters back to 2014 just against Russian APTs. So there you go. Everyone has been made nervous about quantum computer. Most of the stories, treat it as if it's going to be the end of everything if these things come out. And the likelihood that it will appear and be able to decrypt everything that ever existed in about 5 minutes seems to be going up. Well, while quantum's not quite here yet, I mean, we have some quantum computers. There's several different people in the world. I think the Chinese have the most advanced one at this point in terms of how many qubits it has. But, we're working on it. So, pretty soon you'll probably be carrying around, a quantum computer in your wristwatch that's got more computing power than, all the energy in the known universe or something. But anyway, except it runs at like 100 centigrade, so it's going to be a watch with like a giant heat sink attached to it to try to keep your wrist cool enough so that your bones don't melt. But that's old tech, new tech stuff. They'll get it worked out eventually. But anyway, in this article, which is quite interesting, they talked about some algorithms that can quite easily be converted to quantum-friendly algorithms, and had some examples of that if you're interested. The one they were talking about mostly was prime factorization. So, if you took computer science 2 or 3 in college, at some point you probably got asked to write the prime factorization program. I mean, that's an old classic. A lot of people have done that one. I think I had it in a couple of different classes, which was nice because, it was like, oh, I already did this. So, but public key cryptography relies heavily on this. And guess what? This is an algorithm that is easily converted into a quantum algorithm. And again, they walk through some examples of this stuff in the article. And if it is a quantum algorithm, that means breaking that encryption. That basically the way encryption works is it relies on long time periods, right? If it takes so many cycles to crunch these things out that, it's longer than the expected lifespan of the universe, then the encryption is pretty effective. But if next week we invent something faster, that's why we keep getting new kinds of encryption, right? In the example, they were talking about 2,072-bit prime numbers multiplied together to produce a 6,144-bit prime product and all that kind of stuff. But if you have that kind of size with traditional computing, it's very, very difficult currently to split that back into its factors and basically break the encryption. So, that keeps people out of it for long enough to make it infeasible to actually crack. But quantum would mean that's no longer the case. So OpenSSH 9, which was just released on Friday, has elected to start moving under the assumption that it's going to happen and get on board. So NIST, that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, has been holding a post-quantum crypto competition for a while for people to try to come up with new algorithms that will be resistant to quantum computing. And they've not finished that competition yet, but there are algorithms they've published now. And so OpenSSH adopted one of the early ones that was put in called NTRU Prime as a new default public key encryption system to get out in front of it. Now, that doesn't mean all your traditional encryptions and so forth with OpenSSH won't work. It just means they're actually starting to add some of these capabilities in there in case that quantum is here. And it is probably coming sooner than you think, or maybe not, or both at the same time. Is Hurley both on the island, off the island, alive, dead, and hanging out with Cheech Marin all at the same time? And I know that's a really obscure reference, but I refuse to make any cat jokes. None. No cat jokes here. Sorry. Cats deserve your respect. There's cat hair all over me. Anyway, Spring4Shell is now being used as a vector for Mirai botnet. Trend Micro found active exploitation of Spring4Shell, which we already knew, but this heavily covered vulnerability in VMware Spring Framework is now being used to support Mirai infections. The exploits were being used, that's the Spring4Shell exploit, to break into infect devices with good old Mirai. The first cases of this were seen in April on some systems in Singapore. Spring4Shell is found in the Spring Framework versions before 5.220 and 5.318, JDK version 9 and higher, Apache Tomcat, and other systems. Mirai is an infamous malware that targets Linux-based networking devices and turns them into botnet drones. So, it's like a marriage made in some kind of nerd heaven. But Mirai's been around since about 2016, but it is also a modular piece of malware that can be adapted and modded and updated and so on. A new open source product from DeepFence is called PacketStreamer, and it can capture network traffic from multiple sources, which can be used to reveal hacking behavior active on the network. The tool collects raw network packets on remote hosts, filters them, and then sends them to a central listening device in PCAP format, which is really handy. The sensors are supported on many different platforms, but the real reason I brought this up was because, one, it's kind of an interesting open source product, but it also works on Docker and Kubernetes nodes. So this is a new kind of approach to this virtualization stuff, and everybody struggles with that for their sensors. So once the traffic is captured, of course, you can open it. It's PCAP, so you can open it in Wireshark, or you can get fancy stuff that costs a lot more money than Wireshark. But you can use all these kind of things. And it's really targeted, according to the company, based on the need for mechanisms to create data for use in machine learning security tools. So they're really targeting this as being a way to create PCAP files that machine learning tools can be trained on and then also can look at for comparison basis. analysis of behavior, so forth, all that kind of stuff. And they also said it could be really useful in forensic situations because, if you've got all this traffic logged, you may be able to go through it later and see kind of what was going on in the past. According to DeepFence, there is no other simple, lightweight, scalable method to capture and stream packets from virtualized environments across multiple clouds, which we were looking for something like that not too long ago. So it seems like kind of an interesting tool that I'm sure everybody will be checking out. I just wanted to point this story out. I saw this story and I was like, I'm going to tell everybody about this because it's really annoying. If you use TurboTax, and this were the two products that were covered in the story, TurboTax and H&R Block Online, so two very large companies that are used to file taxes in the United States, probably other places too, but specifically in the United States. And those are due this week, by the way, if you'd forgotten. So, if you got to pay your tax bills this week. I know I'm getting ready to pay mine, so it's no fun for us. We're drinking bottom shelf gin this week to save up to pay that. But anyway, when you click that agree button, which you've probably clicked an agree button or two in your life, when you click the agree button to create an account and you don't read the fine print, there may be an issue with these two products, among others. But this is a really good article for you to read. Apparently, a reader pointed this out to this Washington Post help desk thing where they write these articles and said that when they were setting up an online account, after you've agreed to the privacy policy, so you already hit agree, it then asks you for permission to access your data to, quote, optimize your experience. And I love it when people tell me they're getting ready to optimize my experience because I know that means something bad. That's what they told me at the doctor when I was a little kid and you went in and you think something fun's going to happen and the doctor goes, Doug, now we're going to optimize your experience. And the next thing you know, you're crying, right? I mean, that's exactly how that worked. But anyway, if you agree to this and you agree to share your tax return details after you file, and it goes on. So here's what they said. We can provide you many benefits and ask you to agree to more things, which would include better personalized service and quicker product support. And in fact, they're implying, this person was saying how there was a very dark tone to this, that it's like, go ahead and hit that old agree button. Because if you're thinking about the no button, it's like, are you sure you want to kill this child? They do that kind of stuff, that marketing tactics where, one button's all happy looking and the other button looks all gooey and awful and you don't really want to push it. Yeah. Well, anyway, in the U.S., which is woefully short of privacy laws anyway, there is a law that prevents tax prep companies like H&R Block and TurboTax from entering or using the contents of your return for any purpose other than prepping your taxes. So guess what? The companies bury all this in fine print. And yes, I'm talking to you, H&R Block, and I'm talking to you, TurboTax, and they get you to agree to it without reading because you just want to do your damn taxes, and you basically waive your privacy rights. So included in this sharing with H&R Block was sharing the content of your return with two independent companies in the Philippines. And your tax return has everything on it, so they're sharing it with companies in the Philippines for customer service. But basically, none of this is new to any of us because once you click agree, well, they're going to start marketing to you. They're going to send you financial instruments, and they're going to sell your data to everybody they can. But it does definitely make me upset. You can refuse all these things, of course, but you have to pay careful attention to the way they word it. They make it sound like you're going to be in trouble, that you're not going to be able to get help if you have problems with your return. I don't know what happened. Old Bob might get mad, and you don't want old Bob getting mad at you now, do you? So just click that old agree button there, partner, and everything will be just fine. But if you've already agreed, well, that's it for you then, because, well, not really. You have to go through a whole process to revoke this access, and they're not going to make that easy, right? It's like canceling that subscription to, well, I'm not going to say what that was, but if you ever had one of those things, and it's like you signed up online for only $19.99 a month, but now you're trying to get out of it, and it's like, 2 years later. Anyway, Intuit does provide an email address. H&R Block just says, contact the company with no number. Yeah, good luck. The article said you should refuse both policies, really, but read this article if you haven't. Next up, he is being heavily recruited currently to be the 14th Doctor, but has indicated he will only do it if they use me as the companion in the role. Former Secure Digital Life host and all-around tech guru genius, please welcome Russ Beauchemin back to the Security Weekly stage. Hi, Russ.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing it.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So when I was researching a topic for this particular segment, I had I was looking at optimizing experiences, right? And so I came up with a topic that I hadn't researched in a little bit of time. Like, I used to teach a course in posthumanism, and so I was really excited about this idea of biohacking. And so I was looking at an article from the BBC, which was published yesterday. The article was entitled "The Microchip Implants That Let You Pay with Your Hand," right? Which is kind of interesting. And it showed a picture of an individual who had done a subcutaneous implant through injection of an NFC device that was tied to a microchip, like your ATM card. So you know how you can dip to pay if you're Canadian, or you tap to pay if you're American. You just, it has a wireless NFC communication chip in it, and you put it over the reader, and it does near field transmission of information. So I'm thinking, well, what other kinds of information are people implanting into themselves in subcutaneous or other types of methods? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of biohacking. And of course, as you and I have talked on other shows and episodes of SDL and things, we're big sci-fi nerds, right? And yes, I would love BBC to be the 14th Doctor, better than Hugh Grant. I know that was a joke, but yes, and you can be my companion. That would be great. I would actually like it the other way around. You're the Doctor, and I'm the companion. But so we talked about other shows, things like Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson, or anything out of Gibson, from Neuromancer, to Idoru and all that stuff. And so this term biohacking, has been around for quite some time in science fiction, and it has come into the purview of modern media for roughly separated into like 3 different categories. One category is this category of nutrigenomics. And nutrigenomics is a method by which people try to understand more about how food and chemicals in food affect their body. Okay, so they look at the body's genetic expression, and either removing certain foods to see how their body behaves or responds versus a control group, or adding a specific thing to see how their body responds. All again about optimizing performance or understanding how their bodies are reacting. Then there's the DIY biologists, right? Do-it-yourself biologists. And these are people who have some level of scientific knowledge, right, that work in the field, or some field related to medicine, biology. And they oftentimes conduct experiments on themselves because, there's a whole a litany of standards that prevent them from engaging in unsafe, untested, and unapproved practices of experimentation on other people. We saw that a lot during World War II, and things like that. So thankfully, there are laws that protect people against that, but I don't necessarily think there are a lot of laws, which I'll bring up in a few minutes, that protect individuals from experimenting on themselves, as we're going to find out momentarily. In 2015, Gizmodo wrote an article presenting a do-it-yourself group of hackers biohackers called Group Science for the Masses. And what this group had done was they injected a compound called CE6 into the eye of a volunteer to attempt to give this individual night vision. All right, and they used some sort of a syringe device. They didn't poke it into the ball, thankfully, but it was just more drops kind of thing. And what they found from doing this is that the person, they called the treatment group, sample size of 1. The person ended up, in comparison to a control group who did not get the treatment, the person was able to identify 100% of the item's characters, I should say characters meaning letters, numbers, and the activities of people that were standing 50 meters away from them in almost zero light. Whereas, I mean, we have naturally speaking, we have some ability to see in low light. So the control group ended up getting somewhere around 25 to 50%, and most of that was probably from guessing. Correct. But the person that got the treatment, that got the CE6 compound, they ended up getting 100% correct. So that's kind of wild. And so another individual in 2017 named Tristan Roberts injected himself with a gene therapy cocktail, whatever you want to call it, in an effort to reduce his viral load of HIV. And you may remember this because it was the first time that anybody had done a social media live broadcast of experimenting on him or herself. For the record, unfortunately, because I don't like to see people get hurt, unfortunately, the viral load was not reduced, and Tristan ended up opening the envelope from the testing that he had gotten based on his injection of the gene therapy compound, and he found out that his viral load actually increased. But there's no way to tell whether or not that the compound that he injected caused that increase. But obviously, more work, more research, and more efforts needed to be done. But the point here is that it was important because it was the first of its kind, right? And then finally, beyond the do-it-yourselfers, we've got the grinder or grinders, all right? And now the grinders are truly about optimizing their bodies with chemicals, gadgets, and implants, right? Optimizing efficiencies. But more than that, it's not just about creating or introducing technology for function, but also form. So you'll see a lot of these grinder types, right, where they're doing things like, they're putting subcutaneous implants like NFCs in for easy or more convenient checkouts that are tied to debit cards or credit cards. They're also doing injections of NFC devices for security locks like home door, office doors, even laptop security. So they're doing that for sure. But the fashion side or the form side of things come with some very interesting things. If we remember to cut back to like Neuromancer, we remember that Molly, which was Case's love interest or sort of love interest, ended up having bug eye implants so that she could see all around and say thousands of tiny different little screens inside of her implant there. But it was also what I guess she would call cool, so to speak, cool to have bug eyes, right? Not bug eyes, but bug eyes, literal bug eyes. And so some of these grinder types, what they're doing is they're putting in things like LED lights, underneath their skin so that their skin glows, literally glows and lights up with these lights as a backlight. Others, things like magnets, right? So they're putting subcutaneous magnets in the fingertips or on their skin so that they can pick things up and. It's a life. This is more of a lifestyle. The grinder's more of a lifestyle. So another one too was there's a picture and an individual back in 2017 who implanted a hard drive. Yes, a hard drive, something similar to this, an external hard drive underneath his hand. He did it himself. He made the incision in his garage. Put the hard drive in. Hopefully, it was a laptop one, right? Not a desktop one. And then sewed himself up. So it ended up, I guess, getting infected, and he had to go in and to get real medical attention. But with the grinder types, it's more a combination of form and function, and like I said, a lifestyle. So all of this, right? All of these groups, they bring up some really interesting. Bring up some really interesting ideas that need to be discussed, and on a show like this and other security and privacy shows. What does a future look like where people are engaging in this type of behavior? These people are predominantly concerned about things like life extension. Right, body optimization, as we talk about, and self-expression for those that like the form side of of things like the grinders. But right now, it's really just about different types of, relatively small devices like NFC, right? A Bluetooth chip for communicating. And in one case, somebody had done actually screwed in a compass to his chest in 2018, and so that anytime he would face north, it would vibrate. So, it's kind of wild. So how do you know you're facing north? Well, my chest is vibrating. So very interesting. Yeah, wild. But and we've been seeing this in animals, right? Where pet owners sometimes do the GPS chip. There was, back in 2015, there was, jokes in the Twittersphere and blogosphere about, whether Bill Gates had injected his kids with the GPS chip or whatever. But there's only experimental evidence right now that indicates that that's even possible, number one, and number two, the signal to noise ratio where it would have to communicate with the satellite is off. So it's not producing anything that would be measurable or marketable, right, in terms of what it's supposed to do, other than to say, hey, I've got a GPS inside of me, right? So we're not quite there yet. Now, the issues that relate to those types of devices are, what are the legal implications of self-experimentation, right? I mentioned earlier that, there's laws that prohibit people from experimenting on others. I mean, as a result of World War II and Nuremberg trials and so on and so forth. But what are the laws what are there, if any, laws that protect individuals from themselves, experimenting on themselves, and what might generate unexpected results? Okay, not like night vision, but unexpected. What's going to happen to the kid with that did the gene therapy, long term, right? That's why the FDA has, these types of longitudinal studies that it runs, where we see the effects of medication, 5-10 years out, and even longer in some cases. So what are the legal implications of that? What are the ethical implications of that, right? If somebody's experimenting on themselves, should people be allowed to experiment on themselves? The grinder types are more like, hey, my body, my rules. I get to choose what I want to do, and that's fair. But at what point does the law get involved, right? I don't want your laws on my body. And we've seen that recently in the news, the whole thing with where the Supreme Court is going to relook at Roe versus Wade. And what could happen with regards to that and women's right to choose, or women's rights to choose. And so this, granted, that's a landmark case that will set the stage or tone for the next, for the future. What are the ethical implications of, something where you're not necessarily terminating a life, but you're experimenting on yourself? As we shift to a future with smaller tech, where and when should it stop? Putting a hard drive, a 2.5-inch laptop drive or whatever into your hand is one thing, but I mean, my opinion, go for it if that's what you want to do. I'm all set. But injecting an NFC device that lets me pay for a can of Coke, so what? That might be okay. But at what point do we stop as technology increasingly becomes smaller? Earlier, Doug, you had joked about the whole quantum computing and, running at 100 C, and so you get the watch on your hand, your quantum watch, let's say, and you need a giant heat sink, right, to dissipate that heat. So, but where should that stop? When we start getting into things like, genome editing, like using CRISPR-Cas9 or something like that. So how much of that should we allow to get into our bodies, and as certain things become smaller, many things become smaller because of Moore's law and so on, where should it end? Where should it stop? Should I have an entire computer implanted into me? I don't know, but that's for other people to think about. What about data, privacy, and security? What happens posthumously? What happens after I die to all of that information? What happens while I'm alive? with all that information and who has access to it. I mean, even when iPhone or rather Apple introduced the whole face ID, right, for logging into your phone, they had we saw a bunch of researchers that were able to crack that using 3D printed head with two-dimensionally printed compositions of components, facial components, and that was kind of wild. Or even the offspring, so certain families' offspring were able to unlock the phone because they share similar facial similarities based on genetics. But if I've got my eyes closed and I'm holding and somebody's holding my iPhone up to my face, can it unlock? And the answer is no, thankfully at the moment, because I have the whole "your eyes must be open" kind of thing setting turned on. But if I didn't have that, who's to say that somebody couldn't grab it while I'm sleeping and then just point it at my face and it logs me in, or logs them in, right? And they can offload, or they can export all my data. Okay, so what about those types of things? And yes, that was about iPhone, and we're there now. But in the future, we're going to need to come up with a whole bunch of different laws and regulations and testing, on these types of devices, because we're just barely scratching the surface right now, in terms of how we can protect against these, because it's not mainstream much yet, right? This is more like underground stuff. So. There's a lot of issues out there, and there are a lot of resources that you can look at and research online. There's also a biohacking conference coming up in September in California, September 15th through the 17th, and it's just called Biohacking Conference. And the person who's hosting it is a well-known biohacker named Dave Asprey. So, if you're interested in looking more into that, it might be kind of wild, and we can begin to maybe unpack this on future episodes as the technology continues to permeate the human body. What are your thoughts on this, Doug? How do you feel about biohacking?
Obviously, well, I do want that chip in my spine that's going to let me learn how to twerk. Obviously, a lot of these people have not seen any 50s monster movies, like, say, Tarantula, where, inject a serum, turn into a giant radioactive spider, that kind of thing. Or Un Chien Andalou, if you've never watched Un Chien Andalou, you probably should before you start injecting stuff into your eyeballs. That might give you a better perspective on, actually slicing into your eyeballs with stuff. But it all sounds really crazy and fun. I'm all for it. And thanks, Russ, for joining us on that. It was a great segment. And finally, a video this week shows a driverless car, a Chevrolet Cruze, being pulled over by the police and then attempting to run from the blues. The police stopped the vehicle because the headlights were not on at night, because autonomous killer Chevrolets probably have infrared vision. I'm figuring, yeah. But anyway, the video went viral after it was first posted on Instagram on the 2nd of April. You can hear the officer say in the video, "There's no one in it." Dun, dun, dun. And anyway, I was waiting for Yog Sothoth tentacles to come out of the car and grab the, it's like and the guy goes through the windshield and then a badge gets spit out or something. But that didn't happen. So then I turned the video off. But anyway, when the officer starts walking away, the car just takes off. See ya, sucker. And, yeah, Chevrolet anyway released a statement saying the car was simply moving to a safer spot because it had been stopped. You always see those people pulled over in the most incredibly dangerous place in Manhattan, right there, and they're sitting, yeah. But anyway, but the car took off, and there was and Chevrolet said there was no way the car had been smoking weed, and that smell was caused because the car must have hit a skunk or something. Yeah. Anyway, the car was released with only a warning. And that's the news. Thanks, Russ, as always. I'll see you Friday on the wrap-up show.